Today we're going to do two straight class D&D builds, and I am only going to use the 2024 rules and nothing else for both of them. To what end, you might ask? Simple. To try and illustrate if the martial-caster divide is really as bad as so many of us claim, and if the damage that martials are capable of really does scale as so many of us complain that it does. Welcome to D4. Hey everybody, so here at D4, every week I take a deep dive into character builds for my favorite role-playing games. I like to crunch numbers about them, I like to theorycraft about them, not so that I can tell you the right way or the best way to play a character, but to explore one potential way to build something in the hopes of creating a character or characters that are both really fun, but also powerful to play. So if you also enjoy creating characters for your favorite role-playing games, or if you just are interested in theory crafting, or if you are just looking for tips or ideas on how to build something that you're thinking about playing, then welcome home. This is where you belong, and I'm really glad you're here. So thank you for watching. My name's Colby. So a few weeks ago, I did that fly-by-night build right up there that was all about like allies casting buff spells on you thanks to Warcaster, right? Little controversial, not everybody loves the tactic. Anyways, in that video, I kind of went off on a little rant about how martials don't scale very well damage-wise in D&D 5e, especially into late game like tier 3 and 4 of play. I actually ended up just cutting that little rant out and making a short about it right up there. And actually, I'd love it if you've watched that, if you haven't yet, just to kind of get the gist of my argument. That short actually got a decent amount of views and quite a few comments. In fact, it sort of started a pretty healthy debate in like the D4 Discord server among my channel members over just how poorly martial characters actually scale when compared to casters, or whether maybe that argument is a bit overblown, right? When we're talking about single target damage anyways. I started to write this big long response to some of the comments in the server there, where I whipped up a couple of like full character builds, a martial and a caster, to compare the numbers, and the response just kept getting longer and longer, and pretty soon I kind of went, you know what? I think this is just a script for a video. So I put a TLDR version of what I was wanting to say in the comments, and then just decided to do a 2-build video to illustrate my points. So first off, yeah, let's kind of lay a foundation here. I think that the way that many, if not most of us, think that the balance around martial characters and caster characters should work is something like this. Martial characters should be good at single target damage and at sustainable damage at that, since they don't rely as heavily on expendable resources like spell slots to get their damage, right? What's more, they should be tankier, right? They can use the best armor, shields even if they want. They have a higher hit die than casters, so can take more of a beating because they have more hit points. Monk says, what? So they're your frontliners who can protect the squishier casters and put out solid damage round after round after round, like that all-day new baseline build that I did a while back, maybe. Casters, on the other hand, in theory, excel at multi-target damage once in a while. They can throw out a fireball or a lightning bolt and burst multiple targets all at once. Maybe more importantly, they've got lots of utility and control capabilities via their spells to lock down enemies on the battlefield, or fly or teleport if need be. Alternatively, they might be great at supporting their allies via heals and buffs. But their single target damage isn't as good, or maybe shouldn't be as good in theory, at least not over the long haul, and maybe with the exception of dedicated support casters like clerics and druids, they're squishier, right? Having less access to armor and a lower hit die. My hypothesis is that even though most of us think it should be that way generally, and I'm pretty convinced that the developers over at Wizards of the Coast largely hold to this paradigm, in actual play, it doesn't really work out that way. This is for a lot of reasons, of course, and can be influenced by a lot of factors. Can the character multiclass to shore up some weaknesses? Can they use content that's maybe a little bit overtuned to enhance strengths or compensate for weaknesses? Whether we're talking about like new to 2024 content, like the Conjure Minor Elemental spell, which does amazing things for a caster's single target damage, right? Or like older feats or species that were really powerful, didn't get updated or balanced for 2024, and thus can really increase a character's power. stuff like Elven Accuracy or the Bugbear species, for example. Because, yeah, I'll be the first to admit, I think WotC did a really great job of making martial characters more powerful and more fun to play with the 2024 updates to 5e. Weapon masteries bring utility and power. Almost every martial class got some nice utility and or survivability and or damage buffs, from, the barbarian's primal knowledge to the rogue's cunning strike to the fighter's improved indomitable feature to the monk's, well, everything, honestly, thank goodness. And I appreciate that, and I think it's a step in the right direction. But I still think that generally speaking, and especially at higher tiers of play, martial damage doesn't scale as much as it should, even if we limit ourselves to going straight class, no multiclassing, and to using 2024 content only, which is something a lot of you have been asking me to do. And even if we avoid arguably overpowered spells like CME, I still think we see this kind of scaling disparity. So yeah, that's what I'm going to try and do today. Make a full weapon-using single-class martial character who focuses on prioritizing damage above all and uses 2024 content only, right? And then make a full spellcaster who follows the same rules and is going for single target damage as well without relying on Conjure Minor Elementals. Also, that caster build will be trying to bolster their own defenses while they're at it. I figure if we can have survivability levels on our caster that are nearly on par with a full martial and still outdamage them, then it might really serve to hammer home the point a little better, right? And so, yeah, even if you're not all that interested in this like martial versus casters argument, I hope you'll enjoy the video today as I simply present a solid, high damage, straight class, 2024 only full martial build and a really solid high damage, straight class, 2024 only full caster build who has some pretty nice survivability to boot. Oh, and I should mention this here because I know a lot of you are going to comment about it. Yes, I did see Chris's video at Treant Monks a couple of months ago about his players of mostly casters getting destroyed by his like NPC party of full fighters. Watch it up there if you haven't seen it. As I said in my comment to that video, it might be my favorite Treant Monk video of all time. I thought it was fun and interesting and instructive, and I still don't think, nor would Chris make this argument, I don't think that there is no martial caster divide to be concerned about. D&D isn't a PvP game, right? But if it were, I think you could make a group of NPC casters who could be just as effective at taking out a group of PCs. Maybe more so. Finally, I know this is long, just wait till you get to the final thoughts. Let me say this. I actually learned some things while putting this all together and have realized that there's some nuance here to the argument and some qualifiers that we will get into in depth in the final thoughts at the end, including conversations about number of combat encounters we're having and magic weapons and things. So even if you think you know what the results of this exercise will be, I wouldn't be so sure, first of all, and I think it's an interesting and instructive exercise regardless. It was for me at least, so let's get to it finally. I proudly present D&D episode number 229, Rage Against the Arcane, Muscle versus Magic, Class Warfare, Swords versus Sorcery. Thanks as always to the great suggestions from the Discord server. I'm just gonna keep it simple and go martials versus casters. Big thanks to my good friend Randall Hampton for the fantastic artwork that he put together for the builds today. He does this every week. He's so great. If you'd be interested in checking out the other stuff that Randall does, or even potentially commissioning him to create some art for your character or even your entire party, I'll put links in the video description as always on how to do so. And I actually don't have a sponsor for the video today, so I'm just going to give you guys a quick reminder about Homie and the Dude's Scorched Basin, whose Kickstarter ends very soon. It is a desert setting inspired by Mad Max and Dune. It's system agnostic, meaning that it will work with pretty much any TTRPG you like to play, D&D, Daggerheart, Pathfinder, and more. You can drop it into your existing campaign or run an entire campaign here. It includes a cool new alchemy system that lets you combine local flora for awesome concoctions, a whole movement and combat system for land vehicles, that might be my favorite part actually, and even a new magic system called The Current with over 30 different manipulations that players can learn and enhance. But you're also going to get unique factions in this book, tons of new player options, right? Subclasses, etc. Really fun artwork, a ton of new monsters, unique locations, including battle maps. There's just a lot of really great content here. And yeah, the coolest thing is that they've actually contracted with me and a whole slew of other RPG content creators, many of whom you know and love, like D&D Shorts or XP to Level 3, Pack Tactics, Dungeon Dad, Diana of the Rose, Bob World Builder, Jay from the Swole Initiative, and many, many more to voice lots of the characters for the setting. You get audio files of our voices when you back the project that you can use in your game for the specific characters that we voice as you see fit. It was pretty cool to be a part of it. And so, yeah, as a result, I actually make a little bit if you back the project. So this is a great way to get fantastic new content to use at your table, support a fantastic third-party content creator, and to support me if that's something that you feel like doing. Much appreciated. So hey, they're only in Kickstarter a couple more weeks at the time of this video release. Do not delay. Go check out Scorched Basin right now. The link is in the video description and in the pinned comment. Okay, congrats, homie and the dude, for getting funded here. I can't wait to see the finished product, but let's get back to the builds. First, an important note, since I'm doing 2 full builds today with lots of meta-analysis at the end and at the beginning too, in the interest of time, I'm going to try to move quicker than I usually do. I'm not going to explain every single class and subclass feature and spell and decision as in-depth as I usually do, particularly if the thing doesn't really impact our damage output. Okay, so when trying to decide which class to build around for the Marshal, I wanted to pick one that I thought does pretty well damage-wise, but that wasn't a fighter. To be fair, I think fighters scale better than any other Marshal due to the additional attacks that they get at levels 11 and 20 primarily. So if there's an exception to my Marshals don't scale well enough, they are the closest to the exception, though even then I still think they could get some love, maybe, especially if you're not an Eldritch Knight. I think the best one to look at then would be the Barbarian. So that's what we're going to do for our class here. Rage and Reckless Attack are great features, but they're most likely not going to be casting or definitely concentrating on spells as a Barbarian, right? They have some good survivability thanks to a high hit die and solid damage resistance, so it fits my paradigm pretty well. So that's the route we're going to go. As for our species, yeah, I think if we're going to go all out for damage and just try our best to eke out as much damage as we can out of this build, we probably want to go with Goliath here and take fire for our ancestry so that we can, proficiency bonus times per day, do an extra d10 of damage when we hit with an attack. Feel free to go a different route if you want, but this will probably be the best choice damage-wise for us. For our background, as always I say, take an old one and customize it or make a custom background as outlined in the Dungeon Master's Guide, but if you can't, Soldier will work just fine since it gives us the ability score increases we want and the origin feat, which will be Savage Attacker for this build. To be clear, I don't think this is a particularly good feat. It only lets us roll the damage that our weapon does, not anything we might be adding to the attack, right? If we had other dice to add. It lets us roll them twice and then pick which roll we use, and we can only do that once per turn, not every time we attack. So yeah, it's not a huge damage increase, but it's a damage increase. And like I say, we're going all out for damage today, so that's our choice. As for our ability scores, I assume we're going point by as always and say start with a 15 strength plus 2 there, a 15 constitution plus 1, and a 14 dexterity. We are nice and beefy. For starting equipment, I'm going to say grab a scale mail and a greatsword. You could go with a maul or a great axe, but greatsword is our best damage option since it's got the better damage dice, 2d6, right? And the better weapon mastery for us and our single target damage purposes, which is graze. And since, yeah, we get weapon masteries at Barbarian 1, let's be sure to grab the greatsword so that even if we miss our target, we can still graze them and do damage equal to our strength modifier. We also get rage at Barbarian 1, of course, which says that twice per day and recovering 1 use on a short rest, we can, with a bonus action, go into a state of rage so that our strength-based attacks do an extra 2 now damage per hit, and so that we have resistance to all bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage, among other things. Really solid feature for both offense and defense. Finally, at Barbarian 1, we get unarmored defense, but we are better off using medium armor. At level 2, we get Danger Sense for advantage on dexterity saves, and then the best Barbarian feature, Reckless Attack, for on-demand advantage on our own strength-based attacks, so long as we're willing to give advantage to enemies on their attacks against us. It's a good thing that we have resistance to most of the damage they do because we'll be getting hit a lot. At level 3, we get Primal Knowledge, which is a nice utility bump, but then we get our subclass. And yes, in 5.24, if you're favoring damage overall, you're going Berserker, though Zealot isn't too far behind. Berserkers get just one feature here, but it's a very good one. Frenzy, which says that when we are raging, our first attack on our turn does an extra bit of damage, equal to 1d6 times our rage bonus. So 2d6 for now, right? Once per turn, solid damage increase. At level 4, we get our first general feat, and I think Great Weapon Master is unquestionably the best choice. Again, if we're going for damage overall, it says that when we make attacks with heavy weapons, when we take the attack action only, then we can do bonus damage equal to our proficiency bonus. It's not as much as the plus 10 that it used to give, but it's better for our average damage now, thanks to the fact that we don't take a -5 to hit, right? It also says that if we crit or kill an enemy, we can make a bonus action attack, and I'll assume we're getting to do that 25% of the time on our turn. If you think that should be higher or lower, it will have a minor impact on our average numbers. Don't forget that you can't add the Great Weapon Master bonus damage here if you get that bonus action proc, right? Nor on your reaction attacks for that matter if you get one, but we can still add our strength and rage modifiers to the attack, so it's still really good. At level 5, we get extra attack so that we can attack twice instead of just once when we take the attack action. It's super important for weapon users, right? And then we get fast movement for more move speed. Yay. At level 6, we get Mindless Rage as a Berserker, which makes us immune to the Charmed and Frightened condition while raging. That is really good. Solid defensive buff right there. Okay, at level 6, it's time for our first damage report. And as a Barbarian, things couldn't be simpler, right? On round 1, you rage and hit stuff. On rounds 2 through 4, again, I always calculate average numbers over a 4-round combat encounter, right? You keep hitting stuff. Only this time there's a 25% chance that you could hit stuff with your bonus action too. And don't forget, 3 times now we can add a d10 of fire damage when we hit. I just assume that we're doing that on rounds 1, 2, and 3. And yeah, if we do all of those things, averaged over 4 rounds of combat, against enemies with a 10 armor class, we would on average do 54 damage per round. And against a 15 armor class, it would be 52 DPR. And okay, just to put that in perspective here, compared to other 5.24 single target sustained damage builds that I've done to date, that is outperforming everything once you get to middling armor classes and higher. Yep, straight class Barbarian. Why don't you do more straight class builds then? What do I even need your channel for? So yeah, big surprise, Barbarians are really good in tier 1. No surprise. That is never something that I've complained about. It's the scaling that bothers me. So let's see if my whining about it is justified. All right, at level 7, we get Feral Instinct for advantage on initiative rolls. It's a fantastic feature, truly. And Instinctive Pounce, which lets us move half our speed when we rage. Solid. You know who I instinctively want to pounce on? My channel members and patrons. But I mean, pounce in a good way. It's like a pounce of love. A quick shout out, you guys are the best. Thank you so much for your support. I could not have this channel if it weren't for you. Everybody else, if you're not a member or a patron, I'd love it if you'd just consider joining. There's a button down there, it says join, or you can find links to my Patreon page in the video description. I offer all perks to all of my members, regardless of what level they sign up at, as long as it's silver or higher, which is like $2 a month. I just ask that you pay what you think it's worth and what you feel you can afford. Those perks include access to the library of write-ups that I do for all of my build videos so that you can more easily recreate them yourself without having to go back and rewatch, right? Or take notes. Access to the community Discord server and access to the live monthly Q&A hangout sessions that we do. If you can't or don't want to, for whatever reason, be a member or a patron of the channel in this way, that's fine. I don't feel bad. I'm glad that you're here, watching, liking, subscribing. These are also great ways to support, so thanks. At level 8, we get another feat, and in the name of damage overall, I'm going to bump strength here to cap it at 20, though taking more strength half feats like Mage Slayer, etc. would be well worth considering. At level 9, we get Brutal Strike, which is both awesome and, to me, frustrating. It says that if we are recklessly attacking, which we're probably always doing, right, we can forego advantage on one of the attacks to deal an extra d10 of damage and then either attempt to push the target 15 feet or slow them by 15 feet. And those things are cool. And I don't think they should have to give up advantage to get them. Just let me have this once on my turn, period. Because trying to use this is actually worse for our damage once we hit an enemy AC of just 17 or above. And at level 9, an enemy AC of 17 is not particularly high or rare, right? So unless you really need to slow or push someone, you're probably not going to want to use this, and that really frustrates me. We haven't had many features to help out our damage the last few levels. Why hamstring my hamstring blow? Anyways, I mark in yellow where you should turn this off on the spreadsheet for this build that I link to in every video description down below in case you didn't know. Thankfully, we do get a little bit more of a reliable damage bump at level 9 in the form of a bump to our rage, which goes to 3 per hit instead of 2. A massive bump there. And then as a berserker, that means we get to add another 1d6 damage from frenzy as well, right? So it's 3d6 now. Okay, for our level 9 damage report, since last check, we have capped our strength, picked up Brutal Strike, which we probably won't use very often, seen a Great Weapon Master bump thanks to our proficiency bonus increase, right? And gotten a little bump from a rage increase, in addition to some solid utility. But now, against enemies with a 10 armor class, we would do 72 damage per round on average, and against a 16, it would be 63 DPR. And okay, that's not terrible scaling. It isn't. It's about a 20 to 30% increase, depending on the armor class that you're up against. Some of that scaling is coming just from our feat, right, and our proficiency bump, not our class or subclass features, but that's okay. We're in a really solid place here, still outpacing most of our other tier 1 sustained DPR builds that I've done to date at this level. It's the next few levels that make me a little bit nervous. So, at level 10, we get Retaliation, which is pretty nice. It says that when we take damage from a creature within 5 feet of us, we can use our reaction to make a melee attack against that creature. No Great Weapon Master damage bonus again, right? But still, how often are we going to be able to use this on our turn? Hold that thought. I'll get back to it in a second. At level 11, we get Relentless Rage, which is a nice defensive feature to help us stay in the fight. At level 12, we get another feat, and I think in the name of more damage, I'd probably take Sentinel here. I really love this feat for frontline characters. It lets us bump our strength or dexterity by 1. Since I already capped strength, I'll just bump dexterity here, which is good for our initiative, among other things. Though you could have certainly taken this at level 8, right? And then another strength half feat. Level 9 damage report would have looked a little worse, but that might be the best choice in the long run. But then, yeah, this feat says that when we hit with an opportunity attack, specifically, then our target speed becomes 0 for the rest of the turn. What's more, when an enemy within 5 feet of us disengages or hits someone other than us, we can make an opportunity attack against them. So I'm thinking that between this, the retaliation feature, and just regular opportunity attacks we might get once in a while, we're probably getting an attack with our reaction a solid 50% of the time? I mean, sometimes you won't have an enemy within 5 feet of you, whether because they have reach or you're just out of nearby enemies, and sometimes they're going to try and hit you or your ally, but miss. It might be a little higher than 50%, but that seems like a decent estimate to me. That's what I'm going to assume when crunching numbers. At level 13, we get improved Brutal Strike, which just adds options to our Brutal Strike. It doesn't increase the damage, right? We could now impose disadvantage on the target's next save if we used Brutal Strike, or give the next attack against them a +5 to hit. Both really nice teamwork-focused abilities. I like them, but they won't do much for the spreadsheet, which... Okay, maybe let me pause briefly here and say this, since I'm sure there will be a lot of comments to this effect if I don't. Or, well, even if I do. But that's fine. Sometimes people write stuff before they watch the whole video. I understand that there is more to this game than damage. I really do. It might not seem like it sometimes, but I do. Utility, defense, control, support, and maybe above all, flavor and character, right? Style really matter. Ultimately, your character is a good one if you enjoy playing it. And being mechanically potent is about more than just how much damage do I do, rawr. Things that encourage teamwork almost always make a character way better, because it's very likely to increase the fun that you and your friends have while playing at the table. I just also happen to believe that being able to put out solid damage on a character is a component of how powerful and or fun a character can be, especially if that's something that you want to be able to do on your character and it's something that you enjoy. And so, yeah, I think it's a useful exercise to talk about things like damage scaling on marshals versus casters, especially when there is a perception, whether well-founded or not, among a large portion of the community that martial characters are generally just weaker than spellcasters at one arguably very important thing that a martial character is supposed to be really good at. Okay? Cool? Let's move on. Because it's time for our next damage report. Since last check, we have added a 50% chance to get an attack with our reaction, but every other feature we've gained is of the defensive, support, or utility variety, which is nice too. But as for our DPR, against enemies with a 10 armor class, we would now do 84 damage per round, and against a 17 AC, it would be 75 DPR on average. And yeah, now we're looking at more like a 17 to 20% increase since last check, depending on the enemy armor class, so definitely moving in the wrong direction. Compared to other DPR builds that I've done to date, that drops us down into kind of middle of tier 2 range now. But hey, that's not terrible. And again, we've gained in some other areas too, so it's not like we're a worthless, unviable character. We are still very potent. Let's see where we land. At level 14, we get Intimidating Presence. This is the Berserker capstone, right? Which lets us try to frighten enemies. It's a solid debuff that we can apply, though we should probably put it in the perspective of the fact that most full casters have had spells that were comparable power-wise since character level 5, right? But hey, you don't have to concentrate on this, so that's an advantage. And you can do it as a bonus action in a massive 30-foot emanation, and we get to choose who it impacts. And that's an advantage. So yeah, it's a great feature, but I'd probably put it on par with a 3rd, maybe a 4th level spell, which again, full casters got, half of their career ago. At level 15, we get Persistent Rage, which gives us more rage uses and makes it easier for us to stay raging. At level 16, we get another feat. And again, just in the interest of eking out like whatever damage we can, I'm going to take the Charger feat here to get an extra D8 of damage once per turn, potentially, and bump my dexterity to 16. Thankfully, we also get our final rage increase here too. We now do 4 damage per hit and 4d6 thanks to Frenzy, right? Finally, for us at level 17, we get Improved Brutal Strike, part 2, I guess, which both allows us to use 2 Brutal Strike effects when we strike brutally, and bumps the extra damage that we do to 2d10. And even though that's not a massive bump to wait 8 levels for, 5.5 more damage per round on average, it is enough of a damage bump to make it so that you pretty much do want to use this against every enemy except the very hardest to hit ones. This brings us to our final damage report for our full martial build. Since last check, we've seen another little damage bump from a rage increase, an even smaller one from the Charger feat, and a bump to Brutal Strike as well. Other than that, we've gained some debuffing and utility, again, which, are nice things to have. But against enemies with a 10 armor class now, we would over 4 rounds average 107 damage per round. And against an 18 AC, it would be 96 DPR. And hey, we broke the century mark. Compared to other damage builds that I've done to date, we're kind of mid-tier 2 again. Honestly, not bad. And if I'm being honest, a little higher than I thought we'd be. I think we got more mileage out of trying to get a reaction attack than I thought we would, especially when coupled with that Hue bonus action attack proc chance from Great Weapon Master. But the tier score for the build, if you just average the damage that they do against all enemy ACs at each of the 4 damage reports, average it in one big number, it's a 68. Putting them right near the top of tier 2. And for a full martial that is straight classed and using only 2024 content, I'm not gonna lie, that's higher than I thought they'd be. So yeah, I'm pleasantly surprised. I don't love the way they went from best in class at level 6 to getting continually worse by comparison every single time we checked in. But I guess, hey, when you start at the top, the only place to go is down, right? And they do bring some solid survivability and even a fair bit of utility and support along with them. So all in all, a pretty well-rounded brute of a berserking barbarian. And of course, we could have made them even a little more well-rounded by taking different feats, like your Mage Slayers, right? Or picking a different subclass. But you could play this build in-game, be really potent, and have a ton of fun with it, I think, and probably not have to think too hard about what you're doing in combat, which, let's be honest, that's one thing we love about barbarians, right? So, okay, Let's move on to part 2 here and build out our caster for comparison. Now, with a caster, I'm going to argue that they outscale this barbarian build even in single target damage, though that is going to depend on some things that we will mostly get into in the final thoughts. And to my earlier point, with that in mind, I want to put some emphasis here, not just on damage, which will come a little more easily to us just for being a caster, right? But on survivability, since a lot of people would argue that casters pay for their potent offensive and control and even support power by being squishier and easier to kill. If we can shore up that defense to get at least close to the barbarian's survivability, then it might make their alleged better damage scaling feel even more imbalanced, right? So that's what I'm going to go for here. As for what caster class to go with, I'm going to say let's make him a sorcerer for a number of reasons, as we'll get into, but I think sorcerers can potentially bring a nice mix of offensive and defensive capabilities to the table. But also, it prevents us from using perhaps the most egregious example of potent full caster single target damage, since as a sorcerer we won't have access to the new and greatly buffed, and subsequently nerfed but still very potent conjure minor elementals, right? That spell's only for wizards and druids, and well, lore bards, and then all bards once they get high enough level, yeah? Okay. As for our species, in the interest of shoring up our survivability, I'm going to say let's go with a dwarf, since they get 1 more hit point per level, among other things. For our background, though, again, I always say take an old one or a custom one if you can. If you can't and you have to use one from the player's handbook, I'd probably go Wayfarer. I do hope that, most of you would be able to take an old background and customize it, since we're told right in the player's handbook on page 33 that we can do that. And we're told in the 2024 DMG how to create a custom background, right? The reason that I really want to do that is because I want for our origin feat tough. But tough is only available to the farmer background if you have to use one from the player's handbook. And that's lame, because it doesn't let us increase the ability scores that I'd want to increase. So if you can get tough, do so. But if you have to take a PHB specific background, I'd go for Wayfarer to get the lucky origin feat, so that we could at least have advantage on our saving throws a few times per day, right? Which is a nice defensive feature in and of itself. For our starting ability scores, again, point by method, assuming 15 charisma plus 2, 14 constitution, 15 dexterity plus 1 to help out our armor class and our initiative, and our dex save. For starting equipment, we don't need a lot, just kind of your essential needs, right? And then do make sure to grab a light crossbow. We will make some good use of that, potentially. But yeah, no armor proficiencies on the sorcerer, and we're not getting any, so embrace the robe. As a sorcerer 1, though, we get innate sorcery, which says that twice per day, as a bonus action, we can buff ourselves for 1 minute so that we have advantage on all of our sorcerer spell attacks and an increase to our sorcerer spell DC by 1. Really, really strong feature. The mage's rage, right? We also get spells here, of course, and we want to make sure to grab the True Strike cantrip, which says that when we cast it, we make a weapon attack, but then use our spellcasting stat for the plus to hit and damage, plus extra damage once it scales at level 5 and beyond. True Strike is not limited to melee weapons, so that's what the light crossbow is for. Beyond that, I would focus on survivability for spells. The shield spell, mage armor for now, and then sleep or Tasha's Hideous Laughter for some solid control options. At level 2, we get Font of Magic, which gives us 1 sorcery point per sorcerer level that we can use to create more spell slots for ourselves, or remember, we can cannibalize our spell slots for more sorcery points. And yeah, it doesn't take a bonus action to do this anymore. I still see a lot of comments about that in videos. And yeah, we might often want to be cannibalizing our spell slots because we also get meta magic now, and they cost sorcery points and they can get expensive. I'm going to take Quicken Spell as usual so that we can cast a spell as a bonus action that normally has a casting time of an action for 2 sorcery points, right? And then on this build, I think I'd want to prioritize Transmuted Spell, which lets us spend 1 sorcery point to change the damage type of a spell that we cast from Fire, Cold, Acid, Lightning, Thunder, or Poison to another one of those damage types. Nice to help us get around resistance or immunity, or take advantage of the occasional vulnerability if need be. At level 3, we get our Sorcerer subclass, and I want to go with Draconic. It's my favorite in 2024, and I think it's the best for our dual like damage and survivability purposes. At this level, it gives us some nice survivability bumps in the form of Draconic Resilience, which says that we get 1 more hit point per sorcerer level, and basically a sorceress unarmored defense. This kind of really is like the caster version of a barbarian, isn't it? So this is going to let our AC be equal to 10 plus our dexterity plus our charisma modifier. So let's pause here for a second and talk about our defenses. As a dwarf, if we got the tough feat plus Draconic Resilience, we would be adding an extra 4 hit points per level now beyond our Constitution modifier, which actually means that this character is going to be getting more hit points per level despite our D6 hit die than our full martial barbarian was getting with their D12 hit die. Sure, the barbarian's going to have resistance to a lot of the damage and could have done even better by comparison by also going tough and dwarf, right? But we were trying to eke out more damage to their relatively poor damage scaling, yeah? Each of these builds is trying to shore up their supposed weak spots. And as for our armor class, our sorcerer is now sitting at a 16. That's as good as the barbarian was in scale mail, a level 1. Sure, they can get up to half plate medium armor, which would let them get to 17 eventually, right? But we on this build are going to cap out at an 18 once we've got our charisma maxed, with room to go beyond if we were to bump dexterity. And perhaps most importantly of all, we got the shield spell, among other defensive spells. And the barbarian is probably attacking recklessly. So even though they'll have resistance to a lot of the damage, they're likely going to be getting hit a lot more often than this character would, especially since the barbarian has to be in melee and we very much do not. So I feel like the survivability here is pretty on par the way that we've built them. Feel free to argue with me in the comments if you disagree. And sure, the Draconic Sorcerer might have a defensive advantage over other full casters, but the Berserker Barbarian has an offensive advantage over most other full martials. Yeah, I'm cherry picking a bit here on both sides to try and make a point. Let's move on. We also get 2nd level spells at this level. Draconic Sorcerers get Alter Self, Chromatic Orb, Command, and Dragon's Breath for free. Pretty decent selection there. But beyond that, I would be focused on, defense and utility and control. So like Blur, Mirror Image, Misty Step, Web or Suggestion, right? And then above all, and most importantly, Scorching Ray. It's a potent single target damage dealer. It puts out 3 rays of fire that hit for 2d6 each, plus 1 more 2d6 ray for every level that we upcast it. It's solid for single target damage. It's what we're going to be focused on building. At level 4, we get our first general feat, and I think I'd probably go actually with Spell Sniper here. I maybe don't use this feat enough in builds. It makes it so that we don't have disadvantage when casting ranged spells when an enemy is within 5 feet of us. And though we would be doing our best to stay at ranged on this build, sometimes you just can't stop an enemy from getting close, right? It also raises our charisma to 18 and lets us ignore a 1/2 and 3/4 cover. So all very nice benefits. At level 5, we get Sorceress Restoration to regain some spent sorcery points, and then we get 3rd level spells. Draconic Sorcerers get Fear and Fly for free. 2 very solid options. But beyond that, take your pick in a world of wonderful goodies, right? Catnap, Counterspell, Dispel Magic, Fireball, of course, Hypnotic Pattern, Slow, Haste if you want to be buffing your martial allies. None of them are going to necessarily add to our sustained damage per round. And then don't forget, True Strike at this level does get a bump, right? It now does an extra d6 of damage when we hit with it. At level 6, as a Draconic Sorcerer, we get Elemental Affinity. This says that we get to choose an elemental damage type associated with dragons, and thereafter we have resistance to that damage type, and that our spells that do that damage type do extra damage equal to our charisma modifier. Just 1 roll of the spell though, so not like every Scorching Ray or anything. And I think I go with fire here for obvious reasons, I suppose. And this brings us to our first damage report for our caster. Here's what I hope that combat would look like for us here. On round 1, we use Innate Sorcery as a bonus action and fire off a 3rd level Scorching Ray with advantage, right, on the attacks, and an extra 4 damage to the first one that hits thanks to our Elemental Affinity. On subsequent rounds, we would quicken our highest level Scorching Ray and then use our action for a True Strike with our Light Crossbow that would do a d8 plus a d6 plus 4 damage if it hits. Assuming that we're doing all of that, averaged over 4 rounds, against enemies with a 10 armor class, we would do 42 damage per round, and against a 15 armor class, it would be 38 DPR. And you may have noticed that this is significantly lower than the barbarian was doing.
Haha, you fool! You've just proven yourself wrong.
Actually, no, remember, it's the scaling that I'm worried about, right? At this level, I think everything is right in the world. The caster can't keep up with the martial and damage, even if they're blowing almost all of their spell slots over a single combat encounter in an attempt to do so. Silly caster, you should be focused on hypnotic pattern, not in trying to pew-pew your way through a fight. Use fireball if you need damage. I'll leave out the part where I could be talking about how much stronger we might be with a little multi-classing, or if we could use older content, or maybe if we were a fire giant Goliath. So yeah, through tier 1 of play, at least, if we're going straight class and not using older content, everything is working as intended. We're maybe 20 to 30% below what the Marshal's doing. Nothing to see here. Let's see if it stays that way. At level 7, we get Sorcery Incarnate, which lets us use Innate Sorcery more and use 2 meta magic options at a time when it's active. That's great. But then we get 4th level spells here, and Draconic Sorcerers get Arcane Eye and Charm Monster for free. But beyond that, again, pick your favorites. Nothing that's going to add to our sustained damage necessarily, but like Banishment, Dimension Door, Polymorph, Storm Sphere, Wall of Fire, all great choices, and there's others too. At level 8, we get another feat, and as much as I'd love to just cap Charisma right away, I think we really ought to grab Elemental Adept. Now that we're pretty committed to fire damage, it raises our Charisma to 19. It lets any 1s that we roll count as 2s for fire damage, which isn't great, but it'll add a little bump, with all of those d6s that we're rolling especially. And perhaps most importantly, it lets us ignore fire resistance, though we will still want Transmuted Spell for when facing fire immune, of which there are a fair number. At level 9, we get 5th level spells, and while there are lots of great options, Animate Object, Bigby's Hand, Dominate Person, Hold Monster, Synaptic Static, I love, Wall of Stone is good. As a Draconic Sorcerer, we get Legend Lore and Summon Dragon for free, and Summon Dragon is actually the one that we'll finally be concentrating on for our damage purposes. Yeah, since I haven't allowed multiclassing or older content, we haven't had access to the main thing I like to do when I'm building around Scorching Ray, right? Find a way to add damage to every blast, like via the Hex spell, or even better, Spirit Shroud, right? And actually, sorcerers don't have a ton of solid concentration for sustained damage options regardless. There's no Summon Beast, no Summon Fae, no Spirit Guardians. Haste wouldn't do us a lot of good, so we've actually been better off up until this point not spending time on round 1 trying to get a concentration spell going and instead just firing off our Scorching Rays, right? But now, Summon Dragon is actually pretty decent. And hey, we're a Draconic Sorcerer. Of course we should have a dragon pet to fight with us in combat. And we could even mount them and fly into combat on their backs. They last for an hour. It's a solid spell. It's got decent survivability and resistances, and even can give us an extra resistance. And then on its turn, it makes a number of attacks equal to half the spell level that we cast it at, so 2 for now, right? Plus, it then will make a little 2d6 breath weapon attack in a 30-foot cone. And this is all just in time for our next damage report. Now, in combat, we would want to get Summon Dragon going on round 1, right? Innate Sorcery is a bonus action, and then on subsequent rounds, fire off those Scorching Rays, now at the 4th level, potentially, and those True Strikes. We'll see a teeny bump to our damage since last check from Elemental Adept, but otherwise we've just gained from the better spells and spell slots. And of course we've added a whole host of potential control, utility, and AoE options to our arsenal if we want them. But against enemies with a 10 armor class now we would average 72 damage per round, and against a 16 AC it would be 60 DPR. And yeah, we've just about caught up to the martial character here, especially at that easy to hit enemy AC, right? As the AC goes up, the martial's lead over us increases thanks to their slightly better hit chance at this level, among other things. But we've still all but closed that gap and gotten ourselves into tier 1 compared to other DPR builds that I've done to date. Shall we press on? At level 10, we get more meta magic options. I'd probably go with Careful Spell to keep our allies safe when we need to throw a fireball or drop a hypnotic pattern. And then either Subtle Spell or maybe better, Extended Spell to double the duration of our spells and give us advantage on our concentration checks. Though we might not need that in a couple of levels. At level 11, we get 6th level Sorcerer spells and, PYF here. Chain Lightning, Mass Suggestion, Sunbeam, they're all solid choices and great in the right situation. But don't forget, if we use that 6th level spell slot here for Summon Dragon, then we get 3 attacks out of them, right? And we do get another bump to True Strike here as well. At level 11, it does 2d6 when we hit. At level 12, we get another feat, and since we've got a 19 Charisma especially, yeah, I think I would finally grab Warcaster here for just permanent advantage on all of our concentration checks, and then to finally hit a 20 charisma. You might have wanted to do this a while ago, especially since we have transmuted spell, right? But since we get proficiency in constitution saving throws as a sorcerer, I was a little less worried about concentration. But yeah, at this point, I'd for sure want to grab it, if not sooner. At level 13, we get 7th level sorcerer spells. Pick your favorites. Once again, fantastic options: Firestorm, Reverse Gravity, Teleport is great utility, but this brings us to our next damage report. At this point, we could potentially be casting Summon Dragon as a 6th level spell for 3 attacks, plus their breath weapon, which doesn't scale, and then firing off 1 7th and then 2 5th level Scorching Rays should we be so crazy as to do so. Oh, and our True Strike got a little bump too. But now, averaged over 4 rounds, against an enemy with a 10 armor class, we would do 101 damage per round, and against a 17 AC, it would be 87 DPR. And that puts us well ahead of the Barbarian by about 17% or so, depending on the enemy AC, keeping us in tier 1 compared to other sustained DPR builds that I've done to date, and we ain't going back. Now, I know, there are potentially things that are throwing these numbers off. Magic weapons, number of combat encounters per day, we'll get to it. Hold your horses. We're also not maximizing damage quite as much as we could be. And I mean, yeah, Summon Dragon lasts an hour, right? There's a decent chance we could have it going before combat breaks out, in which case these numbers would look even better. Let's just move on for now. At level 14, as a Draconic Sorcerer, we get Dragon Wings, so we can fly now too, just like our pet dragon. Hooray. Level 15, we get 8th level spells. Pick your favorite. Dominate Monster. Incendiary Cloud is good AoE, persistent damage, right? Sunburst is really great when you need it. But as an 8th level spell, Summon Dragon would make 4 attacks now. At level 16, we get yet another feat, and I'm going to just kind of say pick your favorite here. I'd probably either just bump Dexterity to further improve our armor class and our initiative, or maybe Constitution for more hit points, better saves, or sure, even Resilient Wisdom for like Wisdom saving throw proficiency. But then finally, at level 17, we get more meta magic options, and I'm just going to say pick your favorites here too. Probably from the list that I've kind of been talking about, but that we haven't been able to fit in thus far. Of course, more importantly, at level 17, we get the world-ending 9th level spells. And, I mean, yeah, there's Wish, and Time Stop is super cool, but I think we get the most mileage for our purposes out of Meteor Swarm. 40 d6 damage in a 40-foot diameter within a mile. Even if we can only hit one single enemy with it, I'm still using it to calculate damage over a 4-round combat encounter. We have 9th level spells. Let's use them. Don't forget, True Strike gets its final bump as well here to 3d6 plus whatever else it does. And this brings us to our final damage report since last check. Aside from a little bump to True Strike, the only thing we've done to increase our damage is just get higher level spell slots and better spells. So, if we average everything to a single enemy over a 4-round combat encounter, oh, and assuming a 55% chance to save against our spell, it would be 50% normally, but I gotta account for that +1 from innate sorcery somehow, I think. Anyways, against an enemy with a 10 AC, we would do a 141 damage per round on average, and against an 18 AC, it would be 122 DPR. And that is a solid 30% or so over the Barbarian at this level, and yeah, middle of tier 1 compared to other 5.24 builds to date, but as a full spellcaster with 9th level spells and everything that entails. So let's get into the final thoughts. I have a lot of them. The tier score for this build, if you, again, average all of the damage at every armor class over the 4 damage reports, we end up with a 72. And that is 4 points higher than the full martial build. But what actually surprises me most, if I'm being honest, is that it's only 4 points higher. And yeah, we're in a worse position at lower levels, but catching up and surpassing by the end of tier 2, right? So, all right, let's see if I can be as succinct as possible for me. It's a tall order. The main takeaways for me here, on the one hand, when it comes to damage, maybe the martial caster divide isn't as big as I and others sometimes think. I mean, heck, most of us don't play the game much past level 10 often, if at all. And so maybe for the levels that most of us are playing at, the balance is just fine. What's more, yeah, magic weapons exist, right? And even though I can't know for sure what magic weapons you may or may not get at your table, it's pretty safe to assume that the vast majority of the tables will at least have a magic weapon at some point in our career, right? And while sure, spellcasters can also benefit from magic items, I think it's safe to say that generally speaking, if we're sticking to official Wizards of the Coast magic items at least, sure, a spellcaster could get something that would maybe bump their hit chance with spells, but there's not a lot out there that would, say, add damage to every blast of Scorching Ray, right? Meanwhile, a Flame Tongue Greatsword would boost this barbarian's average damage to well above where they're currently at, and a legendary weapon could probably let them keep up, or nearly keep up, with this sorcerer build, even into late game. But perhaps the most important argument for it's more balanced than you think might be this. The designers of D&D 5e, and I mean both the 2014 version and the 2024 update, didn't balance the class and subclass design around 1 or 2 combat encounters per long rest. And yet, based on what my viewers largely tell me, and what I largely see played in other people's games, including most of the most popular actual plays on YouTube, and frankly, what I tend to even experience at my own table, that's how most people tend to play the game nowadays. 1 or 2 combat encounters per long rest. And I'm not saying that's the wrong way to do it. Frankly, I kind of love big set-piece combat encounters that are complicated with tough enemies, sometimes multiple waves of bad guys to fight off. I think those are a little more fun than a few moderately tough skirmishes with maybe one really tough fight thrown in at the end of the adventuring day kind of thing. But if we're playing that way at our table with only 1 or 2 combat encounters per long rest, then it's probably time for us to acknowledge the truth. If there is a big martial caster divide in D&D today, we probably bear a big chunk of the responsibility for that divide ourselves. At least when we're talking about damage, right? Because yeah, if spellcasters were forced to conserve their resources a bit more because they might only have the spell slots to use 1 really powerful spell per combat encounter with maybe 1 or 2 other lower level spell slots in a pinch and otherwise relying on cantrips, then the damage numbers at least really probably would favor pure martials a bit more obviously. At least for the 2 builds that we compared to each other today. And that's before accounting for magic weapons even. On the other hand, there are a lot of things we could have done to really augment the caster's damage here that we didn't do, but that, according to Wizards of the Coast themselves, are totally usable at our tables. When 2024 first came out, and ever since, we've heard from them on numerous occasions that if an older spell or feat or species or subclass was not updated by the 2024 PHB, then we're free to use it at our tables. And while sure, that's ultimately up to your DM, right? Based on what I'm seeing and hearing from you, from my peers, the vast majority of tables are using older content. Spirit Shroud and Elven Accuracy, for example, would have had a huge positive impact on our sorcerer's damage numbers. And multiclassing, something also allowed at almost all tables, could have gotten us easy access to Hex with a Warlock dip, could have greatly shored up our defenses with, say, a Cleric or Artificer or Paladin dip without slowing down our spell slot progression, right? And, of course, I didn't even try to build around the 2024 Conjure Minor Elemental spell. And so even if we were sticking to my no older content and no multiclassing rules, we could have seen those numbers climb a lot higher than we did as a wizard or a lore bard, like I did in the recent Pyromancer build right up there. Especially in Tier 3 and Tier 4 of play, which is where I think the damage scaling disparity is most egregious. So yeah, the scaling problem is much less of a problem if we, 1, have more combat encounters per long rest, or, if you don't really want to do that, then 2, give the martials, especially the non-spell using pure martials, magic weapons that are really potent, especially as you near level 10, or if you don't want to do either of those things, 3, don't allow older content to mix with the 5.24 stuff and ban multiclassing at your tables. But even then, you're probably going to want to throw in at least a little bit of 1 or 2. And no, for the record, I'm unlikely to start doing that in my character builds because I like to play with all of my toys, not just some of them. Although, if I'm being honest, this exercise today has kind of made me want to do a single class full character build that's 2024 only with an eye to like damage for every single class in the game. I just might start a new series that does that. so that we can truly make comparisons across the classes. So let me know in the comments if that's something that you would like to see. I suppose a fourth option to kind of, narrowing the divide would be to bring in some homebrew, right? Tweak the classes and subclasses a bit to balance them as you see fit. Like I've said before, Monty from the Dungeon Dudes has said to me on more than one occasion that he thinks every pure martial class should get the fighter's third attack at level 11. And I agree with him. Honestly, that one thing would have almost single-handedly let the barbarian here keep up with the sorcerer. Give him a magic weapon and we're there. Would you have to give the fighters something else at level 11? Maybe. And that would be okay by me. Because at the end of the day, it's like I said before, this game is about so much more than damage, right? Even in combat. And so while, sure, WotC has done a great job, they really have, I think, of narrowing the gap with 5.24 on both the damage front and by giving martial characters more utility and debuffing and support options, we all know that on those fronts, even 5.24 martials aren't even close to what full casters can do in combat, right? From a utility and debuffing and support perspective. To say nothing of area of effect multi-target damage. At level 5, extra attack is great, but no one's coming close to a fireball's level of damage against 3 or more enemies, or the sustained AoE of Spirit Guardian. And no martial has a debuff at that level that holds a candle to the slow or fear or hypnotic pattern spells. To say nothing of what comes at higher levels in Wall of Force and Mass Suggestion, Hold Monster, or the damage and healing power of, say, Conjure Celestial, right? So if a martial can't ever compete on the blasting control and support power of spellcasters, and for the record, I'm totally okay with that, and the defensive capabilities of casters aren't that far off when you consider defensive spells and being able to stay at range, then at the very least, please, let those martials not just compete or keep up with, but really truly excel at sustained single target damage. Okay, and soapbox. That's the video for the week. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I learned a lot. I hope you found it interesting and or informative. I hope you know that I love you. Thank you so much for all that you do for me, for this channel. I hope that you'll have a really great day and a fantastic week. And if you don't, above all, I hope that you will hang in there. Don't give up. I hope you'll do good and be kind, and that I see you again very soon, and that you'll do some things at your tables to help martials scale better in single target damage. Anyways, take care. Bye. Oh, all the money that e'er I had, I spent it in good company, and all the harm that e'er I've done, alas, it was to none but me. And all I've done for want of wit, to memory now I can't recall. So fill to me the parting glass. Good night and joy be with you all. I love that old Irish ballad. Probably my favorite version of it is the Waylon Jennings, one of my favorite just musicians of all time. They just came in concert to Utah, and they haven't done that in like decades, I think. I don't know, or at least 15 years or something. I've never seen them here, but they came here and it was amazing. They always finish their performance with that song, like an a cappella version of it. So you ought to go look it up. The Parting Glass, the Waylon Jennings. Just Google it or search it on YouTube, and you'll get a beautiful little 2.5 minutes added to your life. Let's see. Even if we have a straight class. Here, level 9 damage report would look. Level 9 damage report would have looked. Level 9 damage report would have looked a little worse, but those are the build. Okay. I go potty. Okay. Okay. Drag. I go potty.